So what's up, kids? I've been not making videos for quite some time now, so I figured it was time I got back to it. I've been doing the same old thing other than not making videos. Been reading a shit ton of books and listening to my podcasts when I'm at work, because that's what I do. I put on the headphones, and I'm telling you, Miguel was right. You got to get YouTube Premium so that you're not dealing with ads. And also on YouTube, I like to make these like playlists, and I think my playlist has like 1,800 songs on it. So sometimes I have to shuffle them because I'll save songs, like I'll bring up an album and I'll save each song individually, but I never want to listen to them all together, especially the jazz stuff. I don't want to listen to 4 hours of Eric Dolphy, blowing the horn. I have to just sort of like intersperse that in with some of the, electronic music and rock music that I've got in there. But anyway, I don't know. What have I been up to? I've been reading books. I've got this huge stack of books. I got stacks of books all over my room. I don't even know where to begin. I was going to bust some of them out, but I don't want them all over the bed. I wasn't even sure what I was going to do today. I got my guitar here. I could play some guitar, but I probably won't. I just kind of wanted to get another episode out and just talk a little bit, because it's been so long since I did that. The thing is, the last video I did kind of took a lot out of me. And I have a tendency to do that. The same thing kind of happened when I recorded the Creep Show song, for the Deep Tank thing. I spent so much time working on that song and just adding tracks and mixing it and everything. By the time I was done, I never wanted to record again. It just burned me out. It burned me to smithereens, man. And it was a long time before I recorded again after that. And it's been a while since I've recorded. I haven't really been working on my album. I have been working on music, but it's a secret project. But yeah, I've been reading a lot. And what the hell have I been reading? What is my reading regimen looking like? Well, I'm still doing the same thing I was doing, where I just read like 30 pages out of a book, if that, a couple chapters, and then move on to the next one. Because, and I've explained this before, I never want to get too involved. I don't want to get too wrapped up in the mindset. I don't want to get brainwashed by the author. So I'll read enough of it to where I can be kind of look at it from a distance and be critical, and then I'll read something else. And that way I can read something like Marx, and then not, turn into one of those. If I get through the whole book in one shot, I might be a changed man after that. I don't want that for myself. Okay, so if I'm going to read that kind of stuff, I'll take it piecemeal. I actually just ordered a book on critical race theory, and I by the OGs of critical race theory. And I wanted to be able to read it. That way I know what's in there. Because people are like, you don't know what critical race theory is. I have a pretty good idea of what it is, but I'd rather read it from the authoritative source myself and then be able to, hold my end of a conversation. But let's see. So what have I been going through? I've got a couple of priorities in there that I'm trying to knock out, because there's certain books I started reading a long time ago, and I'm like, why haven't I finished this yet? It's like, oh yeah, because I'm reading 50 other books. So I keep starting new ones too. So the main heifers that I've been reading, the ones that I actually have some hope of finishing in the near future, is like, what do I got? So the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. And I don't think I've ever done a analysis on that. I don't think I've ever talked about that one. I may have talked about it in passing, but I never did like an analysis, like I did with the Sekhar book, or like the Bolshevik. What was it? The Bertrand Russell book, Bolshevik, the Practice and Theory of Bolshevik. Practice and Theory of Bullshit. It's pretty much what it is. It's funny how I read a lot of books that are anti. I've been reading more and more from authors whom I disagree with, and I think it's good to do that. I don't think it's good to be caught too much in your bubble. It's not like I'm trying to brainwash myself, but I like to see the other side. I like to know the other side of the argument, because I listen to a lot of podcasts by people who are kind of on the, well, let's just call them patriots, okay? And so I would distinguish them from, some of them, like, what you call the establishment right, which would be like, the GOP, the Ben Shapiros of the world, the Mark Levins of the world. Those guys, it seem like they're pretty establishment. They're kind of down for the war machine, and I think that's pretty much where I draw. That's my red line right there. Like, if you're like pro-war, I'm just not interested. And so I think that it's kind of the aspect where it's just like, leave me the hell alone, let me eat my sandwich, and don't try to steal my property. Like, I'm kind of on that trip. I don't wish to tell anybody ever what to do with their own lives. But I don't need to explain that. I don't have to explain myself in that department. Anybody who knows me knows me. But yeah, I just want to be left to my own devices and be able to read my books. And don't tell me that I have to eat bugs. Don't tell me that I have to get an injection or pledge allegiance to something other than what I would normally pledge allegiance to. Don't make me say something I disagree with. Like, I'll try not to be rude in any case, and I'll try not to disrupt anybody else's like good cheer. But at the same time, like, don't tell me to, speak the word. I'm not going to speak it. It's going to go unspoken. Do I have to do the other? Okay. Yeah, you got to complete it. Yeah. When I was a kid, I remember there was a guy who did this. He's like, I could do the monkey face. Can you do the monkey face? And I was like, no, what's the monkey face? And he goes. So I thought that was pretty good. I never really saw what I look like when I do that. But I remember when I was a kid, I used to make faces. I felt like my face was made out of rubber and I could contort it in any way. And now I can't really do that. And I think I've mentioned this before, to where like I don't feel like I can make, like, I used to make like goofy faces, I'd be like, like just doing weird stuff all the time. But now I feel like if I make a face, like my teeth are gonna fall out or something. And I mean, and these chompers are real, believe me. They don't make them like this. You don't. Well, for one thing, nobody would buy this. Okay, so one day, when I get crypto rich, I may not say it outright, but there will be signs. I think I posted that earlier with a picture of this, like, I've been getting the, like, on my Facebook scroll, I shouldn't even say the name. As I'm doom scrolling, there's this, I get a lot of sponsored content, and there's like these really weird clothes. And I don't know, for some reason, like with every time there's like something revolutionary going on, like, like I remember during the 2020 riots, or like, the fires in LA, the ICE raids or whatever. They always try to, like, all of a sudden there's somebody out there selling like riot gear. Something to go riot in, like riot clothes. It's rioting season. Get yourself a nice, ski mask. And so I'll be I'll be scrolling and I'll get ads for these clothes. It's like, who the fuck would wear that other than somebody who's trying to like set somebody's car on fire? But I think I'll sit that one out. Maybe I'll buy one of those outfits just to wear on Halloween. But they look comfortable, at least. I was looking at turbans the other day. I was thinking about getting one of those. I might get like a hijab, or like I don't even know how to say the other one, so I'm not even going to try and say it because I don't want to sound ridiculous. Too late. But, what have I been reading? Okay, so I talked about Solzhenitsyn. That was the only one I said, right? So I've been still reading the Gulag Archipelago. I started it, seriously, I'm embarrassed to say, I started like 3 years ago. But I read so many books, I circle back, like Jen Psaki would say, well, we're going to circle back now. Like I circle back to Solzhenitsyn. And what other ones? Oh, shoot, there's one I started way before that. So Carl Jung's The Psychology of the Unconscious, which is basically, in the collected works, it's the Symbols of Transformation. It's had many different titles over the years. It's like basically the symbols of the transformation. Symbols of Transformation of the Libido. Would that be the proper full title? And yeah, it's pretty cool. I think I have spoken about it in the past, so you can go back to one of my earlier episodes where I talk about that one. I started that when I was in college, like my first year of college. I started that book, and that was like 12 years ago. So yeah, there's certain things I'm so embarrassed to say. Like I started teaching myself Dutch in 1999, and I still can't hardly speak that language. It's weird because you take on so many things in life and you spread yourself so thin. There's some things you just never really get around to working on. I'm still trying to learn how to ride a bike. I feel bad. My son, I told him I was going to buy him a bike for his birthday. He didn't want it. He's like, Dad, I don't know how to ride a bike at this point. Like, I should have learned when I was 8. He doesn't want to learn now. He's too scared because he's too big. He doesn't want to fall. If he falls now, he's going to hurt himself. So yeah, my son never learned how to ride a bike. So maybe one day he'll get brave. Maybe once he's like 25 years old, he'll go on a drinking binge and like just get on a bike and like try and ride down the street. But I can't even talk him into it at this point. So hey, I wasn't always the most adventurous kid, but I pretty much lived on my bike when I was about between the ages of 7 and 12. Until I was his age, and I stopped riding a bike, and I started trying to, pick up girls. But so like I was already kind of done riding a bike by the time I was his age. And then when I moved here, there was just no reason to ride a bike. What was I going to ride out in traffic? Maybe riding down Madison Avenue, get hit by a car. So no, not in Sacramento. But let's see. So Jung's Psychology of the Unconscious, Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, and what else? Well, I'm talking about the major ones here, the ones I'm trying to get through. Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley. I'm about only like 300 pages into that. And also The Anglo-American Establishment by the same writer. And I did finish, the last book I finished was Tragedy and Hope 101. And I think I did one episode with that in there. I think I just kind of summarized G. Edward Griffin's introduction to that book. But I finished that finally. And I was reading Sean Stone's book about the New World Order. It's pretty cool. It's a little bit, it kind of ties in a lot of what you get from Quigley, G. Edward Griffin, wasn't Gary Allen, the guy who wrote None Dare Call It a Conspiracy. So like that mixed with a little bit of like, did they talk about, let's see, Lord Milner's Second War? I can't even remember the writer's name off the top of my head. Let's see, which other ones am I trying to finish? I was reading Stephen Dorrell's MI6 book. That book is like walking through molasses. That's a hard one to read. What the hell? One I've been reading lately. Oh, here it is. I've got a couple of books here. And I don't even know why I'm going to show this to you because it's just green. But this is Western Technology and Soviet Economic Development, 1917 and 1930 by what is he? Anthony Sutton. It's a little bit dry. I started reading it and like I fell asleep after one paragraph. I was like, this is going to be a long read because it's actually 3 volumes, and so this is just volume 1 right here. So you know, and it's a dense piece of literature. It's no funny papers, that's for sure. But speaking of funny papers, I've been reading this newspaper, the Epoch Times, or the Epoch Times, and I've got several issues of that. This other thing that I've got, which I've been reading a lot, and I should probably show this, is I've been reading these old issues of Foreign Affairs magazine, which is like the official Council on Foreign Relations, like think tank journal, and it's interesting. It's got a lot of facts in it, but it's got some propaganda, some globalist propaganda. Basically, they're really against isolationism, and they're really, and this is in 1939, they were pushing the whole, or I don't know if it was which issue it was. I read one from 1947, now I'm reading one from 1939, and one of them was talking about how they really wanted to get like a UN army and use that to fight like all the wars with, you know, like just send the UN army. And I was talking to my brother about that, and he was saying that that's kind of what they were doing in Korea, was something along those lines. But I'll have to look into that. I haven't studied that myself. I did buy some books on Korea and on General Douglas MacArthur in particular. I got a bunch of history books. So Tragedy and Hope is a history book of sorts. It's almost sort of the history of globalism, but not so ostensibly. It's couched in a greater narrative. There's a lot of filler material. As long as you don't mind reading about like the Japanese oligarchy and like the Mitsubishi family and all that stuff, there's a lot of good information in there. And they just talk about, you know, the British imperialism, where they would colonize the third world. They were basically trying to fulfill Rudyard Kipling. I can't even say his name. You know who I'm talking about. Rudyard Kibbles and Bits. Rudyard Kipple. The White Man's Burden. So they were trying to fulfill that sort of a dream. The dream of basically John Ruskin went to Oxford and gave a speech. Cecil Rhodes was in the audience, and he listened to the words of John Ruskin and just fell in love with his ideology and decided that he was going to take that idea and run with it. And basically Cecil Rhodes managed to, he was really good at networking, and he managed to get a lot of really rich people together, and he sold them on this idea of taking the British way of life and spreading it to the 4 corners of the world. And that was what we needed. That was what those people needed in their mind. They figured all the backwards civilizations and tribesmen of, you know, the far reaches of, you know, the savannah all needed to be converted, and not necessarily to Christianity, but at least to, you know, the British way. And I've just recently started reading this book by Lionel Curtis, who was a member of like Milner's Kindergarten and all that, and he wrote books about the Round Table movements, and that's what and so Cecil Rhodes kind of started that whole thing. So it was like Cecil Rhodes decided he was going to use the sort of this inner circle of the elite, like a secret society, like what you'd get from like von Eckarthausen, and what is probably the center of the Masonic system, or I don't know. I don't want to go too far off in the antipodes of my imagination and speak about like the Knights Templar and all that stuff, because I really know nothing about that. The Illuminati, they call it, right? And so the whole idea is that you've got this inner circle, this round table group, and only the elect of the elect know the secrets, and then there's a sort of an outer circle around them, and they are like the supporters of the group, and they're sort of the guardians and the gatekeepers of the group, but they're also outreach, and they exert their influence. And so his idea was to amass as many wealthy people around him as possible, to sort of place these people in different positions, sort of nodes within the institutions, like in the media. And so they, the Times in Britain, not the New York Times, but in the UK, there was the newspaper The Times, which is the leading London newspaper, and they basically took that over, and they basically took over most of the main positions at Oxford. And so and Oxford had all these subsidiary colleges like All Souls and Belial and all that stuff, and they would place people in all these key nodes, and they were recruiting the best and the brightest. These were all Oxford graduates, all Oxford alumni, and they were the smartest and the richest and most influential people from the British aristocracy of the time. And so Cecil Rhodes was really good at drawing these people near to him. And one of these people, one of these leading lights, was Alfred Milner. And Alfred Milner became his second in command, and when Cecil Rhodes finally died, maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, because they did go to South Africa and they established their colony. Then there's Rhodesia, from Cecil Rhodes' name, so I guess that's what, Zimbabwe. So Rhodesia, as it was called at the time, there's that colony, and then the Dutch colonists, the Boers, were already there. And so they occupied the Transvaal, and Cecil Rhodes set up his colony there, Cape Town, and they eventually waged an attack against the Boers, against the Dutch, and did it totally illegally and got busted. But they didn't get in any real trouble, because they had already placed these people in high positions in government. And so you had like Lord Chamberlain and all these people in government who were supporting the Rhodes Milner Group, as it came to be called. And you had Jan Smuts, and who else was a part of that? Lionel Curtis was eventually a part of it, and Lord Salisbury, right? And he was in on that stuff, and he was getting in on the action. I bet in the back rooms those guys were high-fiving over some butts. I'm sure it happened. So power like that does not amass in a group where butts are not high-fived over. It's gonna happen. I don't know whose butts they are. Don't ask me. It wasn't in the book. They don't even talk about the butts. But I'm sure they're there in one room or another. And so they basically dominated South Africa, and Rhodes had his diamond mines, the De Beers diamond mines down there. And so a lot of money was made, and a lot of power was accrued, and they were able to plan their future developments in other colonies, like what they were to later establish in India and in China. and in other places as well. And so Lionel Curtis wrote this book, The Commonwealth of God. Okay, what is it? Civitas Die? I don't know how to pronounce. I don't think anybody knows how to pronounce it. And I just started reading this book, so I'm not going to pretend I know what it's all about. But the idea was that they were going to sort of change the idea from like we're the British Empire to where no, we're the Commonwealth, and we're going to have this federation of colonies, and they're all sort of loosely associated to the same, central crown, basically. But underneath that, they're all semi-autonomous. And so that's about as far as I can speak on that. And anyway, that's what Tragedy and Hope is all about. That's what the Anglo-American establishment is all about. And then I've got books that, I've got the Milner Papers. That's another book that I've got. And then I've got this other book written by... Who wrote the With Milner in South Africa book? Was that Lionel Curtis? Or no, it was Lord Grey. So Lord Grey is another one of these lords, because they're all Lord so-and-so, like Lord Vader, everybody. Like Grand Moff Tarkin's in there. Like, they're all in there. I wondered that about the Grand Moff Tarkin from Star Wars. Like, if he was named after, like, is that like the Grand Mufti? Is that what that is? Like, he's Grand Moff? I think even the actor Peter Cushing, who played Grand Moff Tarkin, even said, "What the fuck is a Grand Moff? Like, I don't even know what this Star Wars shit is." Like, all these old British dudes who were in that movie thought it was totally ridiculous. Like, Sir Alec Guinness, who played Obi-Wan Kenobi, like, he thought the movie was stupid. Even after it was done, I think he just drank the rest of his life away because he couldn't believe he had done something so ridiculous that distracted children's minds from like things that were more important, like getting a good education. And like, who knows, maybe he was part of the Rhodes Milner group too. I have no idea. Was Sir Alec Guinness back in 1898 in South Africa helping Cecil Rhodes dig up his diamond mines? I don't know. Is he that old? I really don't know. But anyway, back to the Grand Mufti, or whatever his name is. I got this book. My brother recommended this one. He's always talking about Robert Anton Wilson. He told me that this series is your PhD in conspiracy. So I'm willing to put that to the test. I've got a lot of conspiracy books, so we'll see how far that one takes me. And so far, so good. I like it. I mean, it's not bad. This is a neat little one by Mike McCormick. It's actually horribly written. It's one of the, I heard an interview between him and Jason Burmis, where he talked about a secret collusion that happened during the Obama administration. And this guy actually was like Biden's stenographer. That there was a collusion that happened during, like a conspiracy that happened during the Obama administration between Biden, Obama, Pope Francis, and like the leaders of the drug cartels in Mexico. That they were going to have this human trafficking operation that involved pretty much all of them. And it talks about how Pope Francis was installed, because generally the popes, they kind of like, popes don't usually retire. They're kind of like Supreme Court justices, where they just die and then you replace them once they die. And so that's kind of how the popes are. But Pope Benedict, that really evil looking motherfucker who looks like Satan himself, like, that dude actually bowed out. He abandoned his post as the Pope, and Pope Francis came in. So this Mike McCormick guy, talks about the kind of backroom deals that led up to Pope Benedict abdicating and Pope Francis taking his place. And that whole deal was brokered by this like convicted pedophile priest that was already exposed and what was his name? Bishop so and so. I probably shouldn't even say his name, but I will if I can find it. I can't even read without my glasses. I am a freaking old man, and I got to put my boomer glasses on if I'm going to read any of the. Oh, McCarrick, Theodore McCarrick was the pedophile bishop, the disgraced pedophile bishop who brokered the deal to install Pope Francis, and later he cut a deal between Obama, Biden, and the leader of the drug cartels in Mexico to get this human trafficking operation going. And so that's according to this book. I have no idea about the veracity of any of it. I'm just saying what's in the book. The book is so horribly written that I just take the whole thing with a grain of salt. To me, it's just a conspiracy book. But it's interesting reading. It's a little bit more interesting than some of the shit that I read, you know. Here's one. This is another one of my books I hope to finish. It's actually a pretty slim book, and I don't know why it's taking me so long. But it's written by Gad Saad, The Parasitic Mind. And it's basically just all about how, like, leftism is, you know, just basically a, what do you call it, a mental disorder. And even the picture shows a picture of the brain. It's like the whole idea of the parasitic mind. It's like a pathogen gets into the brain. It's idea pathogens. The idea is that ideas get into the brain, and it's like basically like a worm eating your brain, right? And that's the whole idea, that you stop using your brain at some point because you get infected with these horrible political ideas when you go to a university. And so he was a university professor. He was some highfalutin professor of evolutionary psychology, and I think he was probably ousted from the college for being too, like, right wing or something. But he ended up going, well, fuck you guys anyway, because, like, I have like a platform, and I can make millions of dollars, you know, making YouTube videos, and fuck you guys, you know. So a lot of people did that. That's what Jordan Peterson did, and that's also what what's his name, Brett Weinstein. He took his little brother along with him, and his wife, for that matter. And yeah, so they got their whole little community. They all go on Joe Rogan. They all take bong hits together. It's good stuff. All right, I'm back. I had to take a little break. Just being an old man and everything, I'd start having back pains because of where I'm sitting right now. It's not the best place in the world to be parked. But I did grab a couple of books while I was up, and I had to show this. This is one of the old, what do you call it? Issues of Foreign Affairs. This one is from October 1939. I'm so crazy. I order these things off of eBay and I read them. And I have to be really careful that they don't fall apart while I'm reading them. And so it's interesting. I mean, as much as I know that it's from the Council on Foreign Relations, so I already know that it's full of globalist propaganda. But the reason I read it is because there's facts in there. And sometimes, like, even if the propaganda's in there, you can kind of sift the wheat from the chaff. And, you know, there's, for instance, like, you're reading about, you know, the different countries who are jockeying for power over, like, you know, the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles Straits. You know, I had no idea those things even existed until I read the article. So, like, you know, it's interesting reading. There's a lot of history in there. There's a lot of geopolitical, you know, what do you call it? Word salad? A lot of geopolitical word salad in that motherfucker, okay? Speaking of which, Mark Levin. Now, this guy's a real establishment guy. I've been hearing his name a lot come up right now because of all this, like, Iran shit that's going on, where, you know, this guy really wants to bomb the fuck out of Iran, you know? And so, like, him and Ben Shapiro, I've never heard Ben Shapiro speak so highly of Trump as he is right now, because he usually is pretty critical of Trump. I think that he has always supported him, you know, because he's a Republican, but, like, he's always had a lot to say about him. And but right now he is like an acolyte. He's basically he's like actually playing the trumpet at the inaugural fanfare parade for Donald Trump right now. He loves everything that Trump has, like that those bombs that fell. Ben Shapiro probably creamed in his shorts once for each one of the bombs that landed. And so this guy Mark Levin is in the same camp, so they probably all got together and like had like a Jello pudding party, and who knows, maybe they watched all the scary movies together and had a pillow fight. That's what I think really happened. But this Mark Levin guy, American Marxism, I think he has a pretty good take on Marxism, social Marxism, and it's, you know, it's from an establishment perspective, but I take it as it is. That's the good thing about jumping around from one book to another, is that you don't get too brainwashed by the one book you're reading. I think I already mentioned this. It keeps you from getting too caught up in the book, you know, and that's why I like to read books by people I disagree with, like Ayn Rand. This book, what's it called? The Virtue of Selfishness. It's a horrible title for a book, but it outlines her entire philosophy. Like, actually, if you're going to read Ayn Rand, start with this book. Or maybe you can start with Atlas Shrugged, but it's almost kind of it's a philosophical companion to Atlas Shrugged. And she didn't write the entire thing. There's other essays by other writers in there, but they're all kind of in on her philosophy. They're like acolytes of her. And I disagree with a lot of what she said. I thought that I agreed with her more, honestly, because she's a proponent of what she calls like radical capitalism, which sounded good enough to me. But then I started reading it, and she's like very like staunchly atheist, and she basically says that like any belief in God like precludes her entire philosophy, like at any rate. And so I just, you know, anybody can pick and choose what they're going to take from any one book, right? I think that there's good moments in it, but like the whole idea that like selfishness is this great thing and altruism is like for losers, like it's a little far-fetched. I mean, it seems like she's edge-maxing, you know, in this book for sure. And I've read about half of, not even half of it. I've read about a quarter of it. But already I find a lot that I disagree with. I'll say that much. So we were talking about, or I was talking about, the Milner Papers, South Africa. This is volume 1. Ooh, this is a nice book. I like this book. It's very pretty. When you're reading it, you feel like you're reading an old pirate book. Like, that's how I used to feel about Treasure Island, because when I was a kid, my dad had this really old, like, copy of Treasure Island. And so for me, like, to read Treasure Island seemed like a really old book. But I later went out and got, like, a paperback copy for my son. And it's really, like, super, like, looks like a kid's book. It's got, like, a real cartoonish looking cover on it. So now when I read it, it doesn't seem so old. It just seems to me like a 60s kind of boomer version of the Goonies. Which is fine, except there's only one kid, so there's only like one Goonie, and then like everybody else is Fratellis. So like you got the Goonie kid, and then like, I almost said Captain Ahab. What's his name? Long John Silver. Yeah, Long Dong Silver's in it, and he's like the Mama Fratelli. And then like all the other pirates are all bad. And then as he's on the island, he runs into this dude who was like, basically. Tom Hanks from what's the movie with Wilson? What's that movie called? Shipwrecked or something like that? Cast Aside or whatever it's called. Castaway. So there's a castaway who's on the island, and the kid runs into him, and so far he seems to be an ally, but I haven't got past that part. I just got to the part where he introduces himself. He's just this filthy old dude. kind of like rubbing his meat sack out in the woods, and the kid finds him. So yeah, so there's Long John Silver has proven himself to be a murderer. He has this guy. He kills this dude, and the kid sees it. The kid watches this guy get murdered, which is crazy. I mean, that's like some PTSD for the rest of your life. That's like years of therapy for that poor kid. Ian Fleming from Russia with Love. Yeah, this is 007, right? James Bond. I've got all the books now. Some of them are in PDF form, but I've got most of them in paperback, as they sell most of them occasionally at the bookstore I like to go to. I'll go ahead and plug them. Half price books. They're a decent place. If you're gonna, they're like the last place left. Last bookstore left in the world. Here's my copy of Gulag Archipelago of Solzhenitsyn. Half of the book fell out. Well, actually, not half of it, but a large block of the book just came unhinged from the binding, and I just had to it's like a loose tooth. I finally just had to take some scissors and cut the remaining, part of the spine that held it on, and now it's a smaller book. That's fine. I already read the first part. I don't need that part anymore. Let's see. I've got this book my friend wrote, Systemic, by Chris Lodwig. He's an old elementary school friend of mine. I met him in 4th grade. Me and him and, like, his brother is the same age as my brother, and then he's my age, and so we used to get in all kinds of trouble growing up. But we'll talk about that another time, or maybe we won't. Let's see. What else I got here? Treason by J.J. Carroll. This J.J. Carroll was he was a border, border patrol. And basically he talks about how under Biden he wasn't allowed to do his job. They just had to let all the migrants come over. And it just really pissed him off because he couldn't do his job. And he saw the whole thing as a treasonous act. That's why the book is called Treason, because he basically says that Joe Biden was a traitor. I just got this one yesterday, or was it today? I think today this came in. George Friedman, geopolitical expert of sorts. The Storm Before the Calm. Okay, now I have his other book. What is it called? Something like the decade into the future, or the next decade, or something like that. And it's basically, he wrote it during the Obama administration, and it was his geopolitical prognostication for the next 10 years. And it's not exact, but I mean, he's he's an establishment guy, and so it's just food for thought. Nothing I would take wholeheartedly. I got Future Shock by Alvin Toffler. I've got the cover. This is the first edition, actually. This, I remember my brother read this when we went to Italy to visit my mom, and I think it scared the fuck out of him. He got all into transhumanism after that, and this is kind of like it's sort of, futurism of the time, like the Millennium book. It all kind of leads into that, because you go from there to like Ray Kurzweil, and you start reading it once computers become more of a thing, because this was written a long time ago. And then here's the Milner-Fabian Conspiracy. I've spoken about this book. This is a real neat, the paper's really thick. But the book itself, it talks about the Rhodes-Milner Group, and it talks about, see, this draws the link. I didn't even talk about this when I was talking earlier about the Milner Group, is that the Milner Group ended up conspiring, as the book is called, with the Fabian Society, and they formed the Labour Party of Britain. And so the Labour Party of Britain came about thanks to these fuckwads, from the early 1900s. And the subtitle on this is How an International Elite is Taking Over and Destroying Europe, America, and the World. And it's written by a Romanian author named Ioan Raciu. Let's see, what else I got lying around here? Oh, I was reading this today, actually. And this is my old college psychology textbook from like Psych 101. It's, you know, it's what you would expect as a entry-level community college textbook. But, you know, it's a good refresher. And so I started reading it again. I got this book, Game of Nations, by Miles Copeland, Stuart Copeland's father. And this book, The Game of Nations, is about, well, you guessed it, the Game of Nations. And it's all about how the CIA, they would, you know, part of, you know, there was a subgroup of the CIA. Of course, there's many departments, right? But there was a group that would get together and basically play. They'd have like a risk board out on the table, and they would like role play, and they would even sometimes adopt the speech patterns and the. It was probably pretty fun for these guys. It was probably a big hoot. They'd probably just get all drunk, and they would play the different world leaders, and they would run like drills. Like they would run, what do you call it? Like, I can't think of it. But they would strategize. They would sit in the back room and like, what would you do if you were Russia? So, okay, you're Russia, you're Iran, you're, you know, Czechoslovakia, and like, you are Egypt, right? And so that was part of the whole idea, was that they thought they'd had it all figured out, but then they encountered what's his name, Abdel Nasser, right? And I'm probably saying his name totally wrong, but he was like the, you know, he was the big King Shabango of like Egypt, right, back in the day. And he was kind of like a Trump type of character. And I would say that Trump sort of plays the Nasser card. And the whole idea is that you've got this wild card guy who is completely unconventional, because all the other world leaders at the time were a little bit more predictable, and they could, you know, play this game of nations and come up with some pretty predictable outcomes, you know, on world affairs. And so the idea that they got this Nasser guy who's a wild card, it's a lot like Trump. You know, like, you just never know what the fuck this guy's going to do, right? And so, yeah. And so Miles Copeland, father to Stuart Copeland of the Police, the drummer from the Police, his dad was actually a CIA analyst, or I don't know what he was, but he did work in Syria and Egypt, and like he was like basically Stuart Copeland from the Police was raised in the Middle East. A lot of people don't know that about him. He was like raised in Syria. I mean, I went to school in Germany because my dad was in the service, but I couldn't imagine being raised in Syria, where you pretty much can't go off base. These things I get in the mail because I guess my dad had a subscription, and my dad's been dead for 8 years, and I still keep getting this magazine. He must have donated a large chunk of change, because they will not stop sending this magazine. And it's called The Prophecy Watcher, and it's a Christian, like, what do you call it, dispensationalist, sort of, you know, it's called Prophecy Watcher. So, of course, it's all about the end times, and this particular issue has on the cover, did I say the cover? Has in the cupboard the pyramids and what lies beneath. Remember how just a couple of months ago they found like those like big tunnels that were underneath the pyramids? Well, so it talks about that and how that applies now to the end times. Like, so they have to revise their eschatology for every time something gets discovered, you know, like it's like Putin's place in Revelation, you know. So like, it's kind of ridiculous. I don't subscribe to this whole dispensationalist theology where they talk about the rapture and all that stuff. Like, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't even think we're supposed to know. Okay, I believe in God, but when I'm reading Revelation, I just get the popcorn out. What else? Oh, this book right here. This is a big heifer, and it's called The History of the Israeli-Palestinian Conflict. Look how thick this thing is. Okay, I'm on like page 1. Okay, so I'm not really. I'm on like page 5. But yeah, this is what you get. This is what basically is now required reading if you're going to even talk about this shit. Because it's one thing to go to Glastonbury and like chant, you know, you know, and suddenly get deported because your words are offensive to the globalist establishment. But yeah, I mean, it's good to know your P's and Q's, you know, and so I'm learning. What else we got here? We got one more. I got one more to show. The Charlie Parker Omni book. Okay, this is in the key of C, and it's all Charlie Parker's horn solos, and a lot of like college, you know, jazz theory courses will assign this book, and a lot of times people have to be able to sight read it. They have to be able to sing it. They try to scat the melodies in there. For me, I just pick them apart and try and learn them on guitar, and that's just part of my trick bag to like learn the licks and go, okay, well, I'm just going to get used to this finger pattern, and I'm trying to sort of integrate the bebop idioms into my guitar playing so that I can just improvise them when I want to. And I'm doing the same thing with my other secret project. Okay, so I'm taking vocal lines and I'm working out the vocal lines on the guitar, vocal melodies, so that it's more melodic. It's not, see, this is it's soloing. It's all over the place. Okay, but with the vocal lines that I'm learning, it's more melodic, and I'm hoping that it's going to make my guitar soloing more singy, you know, having like a vocal quality to the guitar solo, so it's not just ripping a bunch of scales, which is something I feel like I've fallen into the trap of in the past, is just to be noodling or just to be like shredding, and I just don't want to do that with my time anymore. You know, with recent revelations in my musical life, I've decided that I would rather play something with more feeling, and so the vocal lines I think are good for that, and I want to be able to just put the feeling and the emotion into the music and not worry so much about the athletic aspect of music. I don't want to be tripping on like technique. Of course, everybody wants to have good technique, but you know, like Jimi Hendrix, you know, his technique isn't the first thing that stands out to you. You know, what really stands out to me when I hear Hendrix is just what he's saying. It's coming from his soul, you know, and when he plays a solo, like, I don't even think he's thinking about what he's doing. He's just talking through his guitar. I like what John Frusciante says about him, like the distance between his brain and the guitar it's much shorter. He's coupled with his instrument. And so that instrument is him just speaking his soul. And I think that's the goal. I think that's the goal with music. It's not about shredding or showing off some immaculate talent. And I've kind of learned this through just like doom scrolling through my Facebook and seeing like reels of like Yngwie playing guitar, and there's always some asshole in the comments just going, "Oh, this sucks," and it's like, okay, well, like, who did they not say sucks? You know, I mean, they say everybody sucks. Pretty much anybody who's playing guitar in a video is gonna have somebody in the comments saying that it sucks, or it's not that special, or it's not that great. Oh, Jimmy Page is not that great, or whatever, Yngwie sucks, or Steve Vai, it's just a bunch of noodling, you know, like, there's always somebody trying to downplay whatever it is, and it's very dispiriting. I don't even want to, like, put music out anymore, because, I mean, I'm just too tempted to read the comments. I don't want to read that shit, okay? But, yeah, the Charlie Parker Omni book, I'm just adding licks to my trick bag, you know, with the vocal stuff I've been working on. I've been learning vocal lines on the guitar, hoping that it's going to improve my melodic vocabulary. And that's it. That's all I have to say. And so I'm going to sign off now. You guys have a good day. I'm going to have a good day. I'm going to stretch out my back. I'm going to do some reading. I'll probably drink some Sunny Delight, some Sunny D's Nuts, and then I'll probably get some sleep at some point. So, yeah, that's it. You guys have a good night. I love you all, and goodbye.